This happened a while ago, back when I was 22. Enough time has passed that I finally feel okay sharing it. I had just finished college, landed a solid job, and with barely any expenses since I was still living at home with my parents, I was stacking up some serious savings without needing to worry about rent or groceries. I had my old room, my car, and all the familiar comforts of the town I grew up in. Honestly, life was good. I knew how lucky I was. My parents didn't charge me anything to stay there, and not everyone gets that kind of head start, so I never took it for granted. But things weren't as carefree as they seemed, at least not for long. What I'm about to share happened barely a month after I moved back home. I've never really been what people would call a party girl. I don't binge drink, I don't spend my weekends in nightclubs, and I've never been the type to let guys shape my life or decisions. That's just how I was raised. My dad's always been the most important man in my life, and the whole hookup culture thing has always made me feel sick. My day-to-day was simple. I'd get up, fuel my caffeine habit, head to work, go to the gym, unwind with a book or scroll on my phone for a bit, then call it a night. Weekends were for hikes, day trips, board games, whatever sounded fun in the moment. Then one weekend, my closest friend from college, Marissa, invited me and our other two friends, Jenna and Elise, to spend a few days at her family's beach house. I'd never been, but from how Marissa described it, it sounded like something out of a travel magazine. Quiet, tucked far away from packed boardwalks and noise right on a private beach, just steps from the shoreline. To put it simply, Marissa's family had money. I think both of her parents were surgeons, so I figured their vacation home would be impressive, and I wasn't wrong. The place looked insane. I'm no expert, but I know a modern home when I see one, and this thing looked more like a private intelligence facility than a beach house. I have plenty of photos from that trip, believe me, but I'd never share them. It just wouldn't feel right out of respect for her family, even if none of this had ever happened. Once we got there and unpacked, we decided to bunk together. The house had more than enough rooms for each of us to have our own, but that just didn't sound as fun. So we all stayed in one of the kids' rooms, the one with 2 sets of bunk beds and a bathroom attached. We were 3 nights in, which honestly feels like the perfect limit when you're sharing space with people who aren't family. I can get easily annoyed by little things, someone being messy or too loud. But none of my friends are like that. Still, I think everyone hits a wall eventually. Now, like I said, I'm not really a drinker, but that weekend I planned on loosening up a bit. It was the perfect time. Our first night, we kept it low-key. We took a walk down to the beach, sat in the sand under the stars, sipping drinks and playing house music from Jenna's speaker. That's when we noticed a light down the shore. Just a small flicker at first, but it didn't go away. It kept flashing on and off, almost like a signal. Eventually, we could tell it was swinging back and forth, like someone walking with a flashlight. Then we started hearing voices, laughing. It made us relax a little. Considering the time, it was probably just a group of people our age hanging out, doing the same thing we were. One of them called out to us. It was a guy. Sounded friendly, probably around our age, and Elise called back. They made small talk as they approached, and soon we could make them out. 3 guys, maybe a year or 2 older, with that beach town look. All 3 of my friends perked up, especially Elise, who's always had a thing for random guys. She's gorgeous and always gets attention, so I wasn't shocked. The guys came over, sat down with us, and the 7 of us kept hanging out. They weren't over the top or creepy, but they weren't dull either. It was fun. About an hour and a few drinks later, they asked if we wanted to go back to their place. Personally, I was tired and more than ready to sleep, but my friends were clearly still up for it, especially Elise. I didn't want to kill the mood, so I told them to go ahead without me. There were only 3 guys, and I wasn't trying to hook up with anyone anyway, so I walked back alone to Marissa's house while the others stayed. I showered and went to bed. Sometime after 3 in the morning, I got a FaceTime call from Marissa. It didn't make sense, She should have either been home or still with the others. I answered, barely awake, and what she said made my heart stop. She was screaming that Elise and Jenna had been taken and that I needed to get her car now. I jumped out of bed like I'd been doused in ice water, shaking as I threw on clothes and ran downstairs. I asked why she'd called me instead of the police, and she said she already had. She just needed me to move fast. She stayed on the line and guided me through everything: how to unlock the gate, where to find her keys. Within minutes, I was in the car and speeding down the road. She told me which direction the guys had driven and what their car looked like, and I just floored it. The streets were empty, and I was going way over the limit. Looking back, I don't know how I didn't get pulled over. A few minutes in, I spotted a car matching her description. I hung up, called the police, and told them exactly where I was. The dispatcher told me to stay behind them to avoid tipping them off, so I followed at a distance, my hands gripping the wheel, my heart pounding the entire time. Eventually, flashing lights appeared up ahead. The car in front of me didn't try to get away. Maybe they thought it had nothing to do with them. I pulled over and watched everything happen. The police pulled the guys out at gunpoint, cuffed them, and brought them to the cruisers. Then one of the officers opened the trunk, and that's when I saw them, Jenna and Elise, tied up and bruised. I'll never forget that moment. What happened was horrifying, but it was nothing compared to what I learned afterward. All three of them were okay with me telling this, by the way. We're still close. And I asked, but none of them wanted to write it out themselves. I don't blame them. To keep it short, once I left, they kept drinking. Marissa didn't have much because she felt responsible for the house. At some point, the guy she was with told her to stay the night. She said no, and he got angry. She figured it was because he wanted to hook up and she wasn't down. They argued and he yelled at her to get out of his house. So she did. But halfway back, she realized she'd left her purse. When she went back to get it, she saw them shoving Jenna and Elise into the back of a car and driving off. She called the police, then called me. Elise's parents are both lawyers, and they went all in on keeping the story out of the public eye and making sure those guys got the longest sentences possible. And they did. The house the guys had claimed as theirs wasn't even theirs. It belonged to some elderly couple who were vacationing overseas. With that, plus everything else they were charged with, they'll be behind bars for a long time. Even so, no amount of prison time feels like enough for what they tried to do. That night wrecked me for a while. I couldn't go near beaches or stay out late or trust strangers, no matter how safe it all seemed. I pulled away from people, even my friends. It's better now, but it took time. I still don't know how this changed Elise and Jenna deep down, and maybe it's a small mercy that they don't remember much of it. But what stays with me is how close it came to being worse. If I hadn't gone back alone that night, if Marissa hadn't seen what she saw, I might not have been able to catch up to them. And if that had happened, who knows where they would have ended up. My best friend Leo and I were both 19, and while it might sound a little stuck up, we came from pretty comfortable families in North Jersey and spent most of our summers down at the Jersey Shore. My house was in Sea Haven, and his was up in Crestport, and that night he was driving us from my place to his, which was about an hour's ride. Honestly, I always liked being at Leo's place more, not just because his house was a little nicer, but because Crestport always had a younger, more relaxed energy to it, and whether we were looking for a party or just hanging out with a few drinks on one of those private beaches we technically weren't allowed to be on, there was always something to do. That night, we had both agreed to keep it low-key. Nothing wild or loud, no parties or chasing plans, just a few beers, a joint, and some quiet time out on the sand. We had been going pretty hard the last few days with our other friends, and we both needed the break. After having a couple drinks at Leo's place, we grabbed a pair of bikes from his garage and headed out toward the shoreline. For whatever reason, he wanted to go further than we usually did, and even though I didn't really get why, since every beach basically looked the same, I didn't question it because the longer ride didn't bother me. Eventually, he picked a stretch of beach that looked completely empty, with no cars parked nearby and every house on the street dark. Honestly, I liked that better. Anyway, because back then weed wasn't legal in New Jersey and we weren't trying to get caught drinking underage, we stashed the bikes under some thick bushes and walked out onto the sand, lit the joint, and smoked while the stars stretched out over us. The only sounds were the waves and the wind, and the beach seemed to go on forever in both directions, while the cool sand sank under our feet. We kept drinking and talking and laughing until we were both pretty buzzed, then ended up lying back in the sand staring at the sky hoping we'd catch a shooting star. That was when it started. I heard it first. It was barely there. A metallic kind of humming sound, the kind of thing you might hear in a big warehouse when industrial lights kick on, and it didn't make any sense out there on the beach. I sat up and looked at Leo, and I could tell the second he started hearing it too. We both looked around, trying to figure out where it was coming from, but it was so faint and so strange that we couldn't pin it down in any one direction. It was just there, hovering in the air. Neither of us moved at first. We just waited, hoping it would stop on its own, because as far as we knew, there was no one anywhere near us and no reason for that sound to be happening. The ocean covered up most of our noise, and there was no way we could be seen from the road or the houses, but even knowing that didn't stop the fear from creeping in. I could feel my chest tightening and my hands getting cold. The humming kept going. After a few minutes, Leo gave me a look and gestured that we should get moving, and I didn't argue. The second we stood up, the sound jumped from almost nothing to something much louder. No warning, no build-up, just instant pressure, like it was coming from right next to us. Every part of me tensed up, and I turned toward the noise, which was now clearly coming from our right, but I still couldn't see anything in the dark. We didn't speak. We just took off running toward the dunes without saying a word. I didn't know what we were running from, or what that sound was, but I knew we had to get away from it. Halfway there, Leo grabbed my shoulder and yanked me to a stop. I didn't understand why, until I followed his gaze and looked up toward the top of the dune. There was something standing there, a figure, too tall. Its arms hung so low they almost reached its knees, and it wasn't moving at all, just standing there perfectly still, silhouetted at the peak. I couldn't look away. It didn't make sense how still it was. Leo yelled my name, and we took off again, running sideways down the beach as fast as we could, until we found the next dune entrance and sprinted up the hill. When we got to the top and turned around, it got worse. That first figure was still there, exactly where it had been, but now there were more of them, maybe 3 or 4 more scattered across the slope of the dune, all of them just as motionless, all of them facing our direction. We didn't even consider going back for the bikes. We ran all the way back to the house without stopping once. The next morning we went back, retraced our steps, but the bikes were gone. Maybe someone stole them, or maybe whatever had been out there had something to do with it. Either way, we never found them, and I've never experienced anything remotely like that night, ever again. The part that still gets me is that humming. I've never heard it before or since, and I still have no idea what it was, or why it felt so wrong, but I think about it every time I'm near a beach at night. It was around mid-July last summer. I was home from college for a couple of weeks, just trying to enjoy the break before the next semester kicked off. My name's Ryan, and I live in Maryland. I'd been talking with my 2 closest friends, Danny and Chris, about getting together, and just the 3 of us like old times back in high school. We all go to different colleges now, so time like that doesn't come around much. We ended up planning a weekend trip to Ocean City. Danny's family owns a small beach house down there. They barely use it, and he got the okay for us to crash there for a few days. It wasn't anything fancy, just a 2-bedroom place, a couple blocks off the beach, but it was perfect for us. All we wanted was to hang out, party a little, and catch up. We drove down Friday afternoon. The weather was hot, high 80s, and the air was thick with that heavy humidity that clings to your skin. You could smell the sunscreen and salt water. The second we pulled into town, we spent most of the day on the boardwalk, hitting arcades, messing around, just soaking in the beach crowd. The place was packed with kids running around, parents unloading coolers, lifeguards blowing whistles nonstop. Everything felt normal, just a typical summer weekend. Later that night, we went back to the house, grilled up some burgers, had a few drinks, and started messing around with drinking games. By midnight, we were drunk and bored, and I think it was Chris who suggested we head back out to the beach. There's something different about the ocean at night. It's almost peaceful, quiet, no crowds, cooler air. We didn't plan on swimming or anything, just figured we'd walk along the shore for a while, maybe sit and talk. We threw on some hoodies, grabbed our phones, and Danny brought a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. We cut down a side street, made our way onto the wooden boardwalk, then took the steps down to the sand. As expected, the place was deserted. Waves were coming in steady, and the only light came from a few dim lamps on the boardwalk and the moon, half hidden behind some clouds. You could barely see where the water met the sand. We walked along the edge of the surf, letting the cold water hit our ankles now and then. We were laughing, talking, just being idiots like we used to. After a while, we stopped near one of those wooden lifeguard towers, the kind they take down at night, and flopped onto the sand to stare up at the sky. That's when Danny sat up suddenly. He pointed and said, "Is that someone walking over there?" We all sat up and looked in the direction he was pointing. At first I didn't see anything, just a dark shape near the shoreline. But then yeah, I saw it too. A figure, just a silhouette, slowly walking right where the water kissed the sand, maybe 50 or 60 yards away. We figured it was just someone else out late. Nothing strange about that. But the longer we watched, the more we noticed that something was off. The way they were walking, it wasn't normal. The movement was stiff, mechanical. Their arms didn't swing like they should, and their head was tilted like they were staring at the sand or scanning it. None of us spoke for a second. Then I whispered, "What the hell is he doing?" Chris guessed maybe they were looking for something. Danny cracked a joke about some drunk tourist who'd lost his keys. We kinda laughed it off and went back to messing around, but I kept glancing back. That's when I realized they'd stopped. No more walking, just standing there, and they were closer now, maybe 30 yards away. That's when the uneasiness really kicked in. We didn't want to be obvious, so we avoided shining the flashlight, just kept pretending we weren't paying attention. But Marcus eventually muttered, "He has been standing there for like 5 minutes. Who does that?" Then Danny said something that hit me in the gut. He said, "He's not just standing. He's looking at you, Ryan." I let out a nervous laugh and said, "Nah, he's looking at the ground." But Danny didn't let it go. He shook his head. "Look closer. His head's tilted at you." Then, before I could stop him, he pointed the flashlight at the guy and clicked it on. I wish he hadn't. The light hit the figure for just a second before the battery started dying and flickered out. But that 1 second was enough. I saw him. His skin was this pale grayish white, no shirt, soaking wet jeans. His arms just dangled completely limp. His head was twisted to the side, not broken but off, unnatural. And his eyes were wide open, bulging. The second that light hit him, he moved. He didn't hesitate. He launched into a sprint, full speed, straight at us. It wasn't a normal run. There was no build-up. 1 second he was frozen. The next he was flying at us. All 3 of us screamed like little girls and ran. I could hear Chris behind me, yelling, "Go!" as our feet tore across the sand. My lungs were burning by the time we hit the steps back up to the boardwalk. We didn't stop until we reached the street. Then we looked back, no one was there. The beach was empty, and there were no footprints behind us, just the waves. We stood there frozen, trying to process it. No one said much on the walk back to the house. Once we got inside, we locked every door and window, shut all the blinds, and stayed up until sunrise. None of us could sleep. I kept expecting to hear knocking or see that face in the window, but it never came. The next morning, we tried to laugh it off, said maybe it was some cracked out guy trying to scare people, but deep down, none of us bought that. The way he moved, the way he appeared out of nowhere, the lack of footprints, it didn't add up. We stayed one more night, but we didn't leave the house. First thing the next morning, we left. For a few weeks after, we tried to push it out of our heads. Then one night, Danny texted me. He said he'd been having this dream. The same dream over and over. He'd wake up and the guy would be standing in the corner of his room, soaking wet, head tilted. I told him that was seriously messed up, but I didn't tell him I was having the same dream, exactly the same. The guy, the posture just standing in my room. No movement, no sound. Sometimes I wake up thinking I hear wet footsteps in the hallway, but when I check, there's no one there. Then just last week, almost a year later, I was scrolling through this local Facebook group. People post about random stuff going on in Ocean City. Someone uploaded a photo they'd taken the night before from the beach. It was grainy, dark, but the caption said, "Does anyone know who this creepy guy is that I saw standing by the water around 1 a.m.? I clicked the photo. Even though it was blurry, I knew exactly who it was. Same posture, same pale skin, same dead stillness. The comments made it worse. Dozens of people said they'd seen him too. One person said they watched him stand there for hours. Another said they saw him walk into the water and never come back out. I still don't know what we saw that night, but I know this. I'm never going back to that beach after dark, ever again." If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing content. Thanks for watching.